everyone. It is episode 371 of This is Whole Life. This is live from WholeLife Church in Orlando, Florida, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning in your earbuds. This is where we discuss the things, the topics that we're talking about each week here at WholeLife Church in Orlando.
Food.
And food. I inhaled a sandwich just moments ago. It's probably going to give me heartburn, so excuse that. Melanie was...
I may or may not have been eating 5-day-old caramel corn, but, you do what you got to do.
And I was finishing my daughter's Indian food leftovers from three or 4 days ago. So
this is what happens when staff meeting goes over by an hour or so.
But like I said, we talk about theology and food.
And food is, I feel like, worship brings us the music component. The podcast kind of brings in the food because the food, we can all relate to food. And so I feel like every little piece of our worship has a little part to play in this process. And if you have missed or you're new, we are currently in the Chosen series. We are following... not all 24 episodes currently available of the TV show The Chosen.
Yeah, we're waiting till they get to, let's see, what would it take to 7 times 8? After they do, when they finish the series, because it's supposed to be 7 seasons long, right?
I think it's 7, yeah.
Then we could do a full year.
Oh, man, nothing
we could,
but.
because, just every single Sabbath for a full year. I'm
going to have to give you, I'm going to have to say I think that's a bad idea. I think that would get a little... I mean, I love the show, but I'm just...
Just a little too much, Randy? So what you're trying to say is we're getting it just right now.
I think we're getting it just right. And I feel like it's been planned, that we have people thinking about this and with great detail, and I feel like we're on the right path. Last week was week 1, so if you go back into your feed, you'll see... It was season 1. It was episode 1. I have called you by name. Mm-hmm. This is week 2. This is season 1, episode 4, The Rock It Is Built On. And this was Stanley's favorite. Well, Stanley's kind of an honorary staff member here. He's here just about as much as most of us some weeks and putting in hours for us in all kinds of creative ways. I wish I would have brought along, something to record what he was like, what he talked about on Friday night, because I thought we had a really good discussion.
I don't feel like you should, Randy, because if people want to hear it, they should have been there.
Oh,
of course. Now I have to say, in fairness, there are many people who probably couldn't be there that are listening to this.
That's
right?
true. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I take back what I said. That was wrong of me, Randy. I apologize.
Okay,
reel that back in.
That was close.
Maybe you should edit that out.
This is Randy.
But I don't think you will. Because
no. This is Randy fanning himself.
This is Randy
with
being
his
right.
Notes. Okay, no. I really thought, though, that Stanley always brings he's a filmmaker himself, and so he likes to bring in some of those details that you may not notice if you're not paying attention. And sometimes the way they do things, they know you're not paying attention to it specifically, or you're probably not the average person who wouldn't know. But, setting yourself up for these musical changes that just are in the background subtly, and all of a sudden you're feeling something different. And sure, there's something powerful on screen, but it's, it plays a part in the music and all of that. So the fish scene towards the end of this episode, I don't know how that couldn't be one of your favorite, at least, maybe not the whole episode, but at least that piece of it was so unique. And the way I've always thought about it, maybe growing up or different times I've read through that story, it really puts the real power and the feeling and the Peter look.
That episode, the raised eyebrow, like,
he's just...
What'd I tell you?
He's so upset. And man, if there's an episode, though, that I resonate with Peter in a lot of ways, it's this one. And I think a lot of people, if you haven't seen it, do go back and watch it, because it's powerful in the realization that Peter's a pretty confident guy. He's been set up by this point through 4 episodes that even his wife is like, well, people like you. Oh, the popular Peter. And, people want to talk to you, and people listen to you, and people do what you say. And so, Peter, whether he likes it or not, or whether he uses it for right or wrong, he's a leader. He's obviously a flawed leader, but he's someone that people gravitate towards no matter what. And I just think that, tying this in with Angela's message of self-sufficiency was just like, woo, over the bleachers. This was a perfect companion, because here Peter is all these things. He's a leader. He's strong. He's when he's leading the Romans out in the boat and they run aground, hashtag spoiler alert, because he doesn't want them catching the people they're actually out to catch, the other Jews fishing on Shabbat. In one way, you just love Peter because he's got all these great ideas. You want him to succeed. You can just feel yourself gravitating towards him. But then when he gets more towards the conversation with Eden where he has to come clean, like, yeah, I don't have this. And when I told you I had it, I looked you in the face and I lied. And you're like, oh, shoot, that's the guy I can... That's the guy that I can see myself in situations in my life that I've made worse by either not asking for help and sometimes asking for help from my spouse or asking help from God. And I'm just like, why is it when we have lowest point problems, why is waiting and just sinking to the bottom so much easier than praying from the top?
I feel like you're jumping to season 3.
Yeah? Season 3.
Sinking to the bottom.
Well,
with Peter.
Hashtag spoiler alert. That's way into season 3. It might almost be the end.
It is.
I don't know if it's a spoiler alert if you've read the book.
By the way.
By the way,
watching Titanic and being surprised when
I totally thought they were going to make it. He yelled iceberg. What's going on? Come on.
Get on that door. You can both fit
There's
up there.
room, right, Rose? Come on. No, but
do you know somebody? Okay, I can't help myself. You know somebody actually did a study on the ending of that movie and determined that Jack and her would not have been able to survive on that. So it really wasn't. Spoiler alert.
Well, there you go.
Somebody actually, can you believe people have the time to do those kind of stuff? That was phenomenal.
They probably there was probably a grant. They probably got paid to do it.
But you know what? How many people have actually had this discussion? So maybe it was worth the grant.
You know what? I'll give it.
Maybe. But seriously, I mean, Peter goes and he exhausts every other possibility. He takes a tongue lashing from his wife who is upset and who's like, I don't want you here tonight. Go and fish and be away from me. She's that upset. I mean, she's crying. Clearly, he's now realizing where he's put himself. He's having this vicious conversation with God, which I don't know about anybody else. I'm just like, ooh, yeah, I remember that one. That was back here. That was over here. I can remember those conversations in my life. And then when he's on his knees on the beach, he's like, you're the person we've been waiting for so long. And I'm a horrible, and he's just pouring out his heart. While that's beautiful that he makes the realization of who he is, he's gotten past Andrew's pestering that he just, he can't take anymore. And I totally resonated and said, man, I have so many times waited for help or to ask for help or to seek other alternatives outside of my own ideas until I've gotten to the bottom instead of at the top when you go, the Romans, taxes, my house, my boat, my livelihood, jail, and not nice jail, like Ken put it. I was like, this isn't going to be like this is like nasty jail. Why doesn't that come easier than waiting all the way down? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why we choose that piece. It's so frustrating when you're watching it. Almost my frustration is just like, just do it.
But okay, so in Peter's defense,
okay,
right? He didn't know Jesus, right? Where was he supposed to go? I mean, he did everything that he was supposed to do. He's calling out to God. So at what point was he supposed to go seek out Jesus, knowing that Jesus was the answer? Basically, Jesus could have showed up at any time. Jesus shows up on the beach the morning after they've spent all night fishing. So sometimes I don't know that it's necessarily your timing, Randy, or my timing, or anybody's timing. Maybe it's just God's timing.
This is just the way it is.
Maybe.
Oof. That's a very unsatisfactory answer.
You're welcome.
0 out of 5 stars. Do not recommend. No, I mean, and that seems like such an easy, pat answer that it's like, well, I don't know. So it must be that that's the way God wants it. And maybe that's true. I'm certainly not going to argue that
There was a monologue that Peter has in, this episode that's extra biblical that the writers put in that's not in the scriptures, but they basically have Peter out in the boat. He's fishing, nothing's going right, and he has this conversation with God, and he's like, you bring us out of Egypt, and then we go through. And he basically goes through all the ways that God
400 years.
400 years of slavery, and he's like, if I didn't know better, I just feel like you were trying to toy with us. Kind of is like you're just you get some sort of sick amusement out of us, kind of like squirming around. And like I said, I had that clip all pulled in my notes, and it stayed on the cutting room floor just for time's sake. But I think that when you watch that scene, if you've never been in that place, maybe you don't relate, but if you have been, you just like, yes, I know exactly how you're feeling right now. And I understand that feeling of just like, well, the worst part is not wondering if there's a God. The worst part is knowing there's a God, and just why can we not just, get this thing figured out? Why can't you just take care of it for me now? And so in this episode, Peter kind of has to hit his bottom before Jesus shows up to bring him back up. And I think, I don't know, I wonder sometimes how much we would appreciate things if God didn't allow us to, I don't know.
Would Peter have followed Jesus if he'd been doing pretty well with his fishing business? He might have been like, hey, thanks for the offer, but I got a good thing going here. My wife probably wouldn't appreciate it if I left right now, so...
Yeah, it could have been easy for him to say no. I also wondered, I don't know how relevant it is, but after, as a staff, what was probably a couple months ago, we did the DISC assessment, and I totally tabbed Peter as a D, right? And so I'm just like, Ken and I laughed because I think we're the only two people on staff that are Ds.
Maybe you should give the characteristics of a D for those who have not taken the DISC assessment.
What are the characteristics? It's a dominant. Usually
it tends to be a very let's get things done. I don't have time to talk about this. Let's just, in our staff meetings, you can look around the room, and Randy and I start getting fidgety when people are starting wanting to have a conversation. And it's like we see. Here's the answer. Let's just move on. This
is obvious to everybody, right?
All right, come on. Let's go. Let's keep things moving. And probably usually pretty assertive types. Probably tend to be we probably tend to think that there's not too many situations that we can't figure our way out of. And I definitely, in this episode scenario, and I think biblically when you look at Peter is pretty confident in his abilities and his. I could definitely see if, you substituted Peter's name out and put Ken's name in. I could see Ken doing that.
No, totally.
Totally see that happening.
But maybe even equally, maybe more frustrating seems to be, where's the balance of, here's someone who clearly pretty much has his stuff together. He's pretty confident, figures there's not many things he can't figure out or things that he won't excel at, things that he will do very well. And probably that maybe the hesitancy to ask for help. Where's the balance of that person and bringing back into it Angela's message of being being self-sufficient isn't enough? Because I think it's a good thing if you can manage your life, you can, overall take care of yourself and do things that don't cause you undue pain, stress, financial stress. I mean, all those things that, people who quote unquote have their stuff together, right? That should be a good thing, but obviously you can take that too far where then it's, well, why would I go with God? I'm doing just fine all on my own. Is there a balance that works out really well, or is that just everyone's got to find their own niche in how that plays out?
No, I think there's definitely one way for everyone to do it.
Is there? well, I'm so happy you said that. Okay, so we're going to get you on the D train here, and you're going to join us.
Well, Melanie definitely got plenty of sugar. She's definitely feeling a little extra.
Yeah, I may or may not have gotten a surplus, which I think could technically still be Randy's fault because he's the one that brought it back from Chicago. So
there we go. It's your fault, Randy.
Well, of course it is.
But, speaking to this idea of self-sufficiency, I thought it was cool the way that they portrayed it in the movie, because Peter was not sufficient in his lack, but he was also not sufficient in his surplus. He had to yell for help when he did get what he asked for. So on both sides of that equation, he still wasn't sufficient.
That's true. I didn't think of that. No, that's very good. It just seems like no matter what you choose in that case, there's somehow you end up where he ended up. So I just think we put undue stress on ourselves when we're just like, you look at somebody else that seems to be doing well and like, what's their secret? You look at Ken, he's confident and, he seems to have it all together. And then he'll say, oh man, I really, I blew this or I made a mistake here. And you're like, man, I just, I wouldn't have picked that out. And we just don't know those struggles. And I wonder how much we miss other people being able to somehow help in that way, that we're open or that we're just allowing the Holy Spirit to bring people to us with this realization to just be kind and be there to listen, where it seems like Peter isolated himself. Well, he definitely, at least in the story here, he isolated himself a ton because of the decisions that he made. People were like, nope. That was a bad idea. He was the only one that thought it was a good idea until it was like, oh, they cut off a piece of my wife's favorite ear. Like maybe this wasn't such a great idea. So I think that, to me, part of it was realizing that I'm a lot like Peter. How can I also be open for myself and to be able to help others who may not have maybe realized yet that there's this balance or there's this maybe just need for someone to come alongside and be available.
So I think we are the culmination of our experiences, right? And if you take out any major experience in your life, you end up being a different person because that experience is gone. Now, there are some experiences I would go back and erase if I had the opportunity, and I would end up a better person. I don't know, on the other side. But I do also have stop smiling, both of you.
I wasn't laughing about you. I was just thinking that if I could go back and erase some experiences, there might be some counselors that had less money.
I'm like, I immediately thought of 3.
So maybe my purpose in life is to support the professions of counselors.
But I also have confidence in the fact that if God needs to break through, God breaks through. I know that there's this idea of listening for the still small voice, and I think that's fantastic for us to take that reflection time and quiet time and listen for the still small voice. But I think that if God wants to speak, God shows up on the beach. God gets in the boat.
Yeah.
God fills up your net. Like I don't know that that God has such a soft voice that God can't get through.
So you don't think Peter had to do his part and get in the boat and go out there all night long?
What I'm saying is I think that is what Peter had to do, and Jesus is the one who broke into that. So it's not like Peter was in the boat paying attention to Jesus. Jesus broke in. That's what I'm trying to say. So wherever you are in your life and whatever you're doing in your life, whatever circumstance you are in, if God chooses to break in, God breaks in.
No, I like that. And I thought another thing that the show portrayed was that, Peter goes out there fishing alone, and who shows up?
Yeah.
His brother shows up, his James and John, his buddies show up. Zebedee, their dad, shows up in the show. And I think it speaks a little bit, when you say, what can we do? We can show up. They didn't catch anything. We're not Jesus, but sometimes just being there with people in that moment with them as they're going through whatever they're going through is what's needed. And then I think I think one of the fun things in the episode is just watching Andrew know that Jesus is about to do something. Oh yeah, Jesus, use our boat. He's so psyched when Jesus shows up, and Peter's so nice, like whatever. And we can be that. We can be that Andrew figure in somebody's life that's like, just try it. Just give it a shot. Just let Jesus into the boat. Let him in. Just give it a shot. Just see.
Maybe my favorite part of them all showing up was Zeb, father of James and John, saying that your wife might be upset, but she's not crazy. Something to that effect. She knew you were going to need help. She wasn't above coming to ask for, just because you wouldn't, she wasn't. And, she was so mad. She's like, I don't even want you here tonight. Like, go and do and be. And I've already scolded you for not being the man that that I married. You haven't been searching after God lately. And so she gave him the what for, sends him out. But then it's like, nuts. He's going to be out there all night by himself. And I just thought that was a really cool idea for those of us that, or if you're in a relationship, or if you're married, that even when you're sometimes pretty upset, it doesn't mean that you don't care. It just means that you're upset. And I just thought that was a pretty cool moment. Mm-hmm. All right. So, the one thing I did want to, because there was a lot of discussion in the chat room, and it might have been started by Stanley, but the idea that Peter is the foundation of the church.
The rock Stanley, the rocket is built really was.
He's like, it was in the meantime. He's like, I'm so embarrassed. In first service, like I couldn't shut my mouth. It just kept coming out. And he's like, this was like a paradigm shift for me, because this isn't how I've thought of it. And he's like, Ken was so gracious and just put his hand on my leg. I was like, okay, I'm going to stop you there. And I was like, I didn't take it that way. I was like, we're all vulnerable. It's good to say what you think, and then we can have these discussions.
And I think it's worth saying that this is probably classic Seventh-day Adventist theology. Okay. And it is not shared by a large number of other people. And so if you're not sure what I'm talking about right now, it's the idea that in Matthew 16:18, where Jesus says, your name is Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. I suggest in this sermon that Jesus is not referring to Peter as being the rock on which he's going to build his church, that he's referring to himself. And so when he says Peter, which means rock, and upon this rock, I suggest that there's a word play going on in there, that Jesus is saying, you're a small rock, I'm the big rock, and I'm going to build my church on me, not on you. I showed a text from 1 Peter where Peter refers to Jesus as the foundation stone, and that the rest of us are these living stones being built up on him, to suggest that it seems to me that Peter had an understanding of where what was really being built on. And then it also mentioned, if in fact Jesus was saying that Peter was the rock on which he was going to build his entire kingdom, then why were the rest of the disciples arguing over who was the greatest in God's kingdom? It was clearly Peter. He's the cornerstone on which everything else is going to be built. That said, there's a lot of people that I would actually say are much more biblically scholarly than I am, that study, and they see something different. They see that Peter is the rock, and that's the route that they go on, that Jesus is building on that. Melanie and I were just looking at a commentary that was talking about that. So I want to go ahead and just absolutely stipulate there's other ways to see this passage, but for me, I do think it matters. I feel very comfortable with the position that I take on this. And the reason I feel deeply uncomfortable with the idea that our faith could be grounded on anything other than Christ. And that any human being is, that any other human being is what Christ would choose to put everything else on top of. For me, that doesn't fit in with the totality of the gospel. It certainly doesn't fit in with the rest of the New Testament, where you have Paul writing about 80% of the rest of the New Testament. So for me, it's really problematic when you want to say it. And the only reason I can see you wanting to use that is if you're trying to go with the theological point of apostolic succession, that, okay, because Peter is this stone, then the next person who's going to be the head of the church, and then the person after that, which is a part of Roman Catholic theology. And so anyway, with all that to say, for me, it's a lot more comfortable thinking that Jesus is building his church on himself as opposed to the flawed human being that is Peter. It's also comforting for me to know that Christ still uses Peter. Yeah. And uses him to be a part of that living temple that Peter talks about in 1 Peter. And that we're all, all of us have other people that we're influencing, and that they're able to maybe start their faith journeys off with us, or we add something to the faith journey that they're on. I love that part, but I frankly don't want anybody making me their foundation.
Yeah.
So let me just throw a little wrench in there.
Sure.
This word church, it's translated church, right? The word is ekklesia in Greek. It means assembly. It means gathering. It means get together. And yet the way that we typically see it when we translate it, and Matthew's actually the only gospel writer that uses that word. The way that we translate it, I think we put it in terms of what we understand to be the church, this global institution. And I wonder if when Jesus was talking to Peter about building his ecclesia, his gathering, his get-together, his people, he had in mind some sort of global institution, or if he was thinking more in terms of coming together.
But wasn't that ecclesia, wasn't that word used for military assemblies? Wasn't that often used for that?
The way that I don't know if it's used for military assemblies. Are you talking about in the Greek setting?
Yeah.
The way that it is translated, or the way that it is used in when it's translated from the Hebrew, typically just means an assembly, a congregation. So if Jesus is making a connection from what he was talking about to the way that it would have been in, say, the Septuagint, then it would have been gathering. Now, I don't know if maybe Jesus was thinking, hey, contextually, maybe it matches this military thing. I hadn't ever heard of that.
Okay. I feel like I'm trying to remember where I read, but that ecclesia kind of referred. I thought it had to do with kind of had a martial tone to it.
But not that I had ever heard, but that might be the case, because
well,
I
will
don't know everything.
The greater Greek scholar out of the two of us, the person who didn't have to take Greek twice because it was they may or may not have been sleeping in the back of the classroom at 6 in the morning.
I will also say that you may be right. It just maybe I have not come across that myself.
We have 3 years of Greek and 3 people. But not all of us took a year of Greek, so that's all I'm saying. I'm completely enveloped in what you're saying, because it's very interesting.
Actually, there's 5 years of Greek.
Oh my!
5 years
I'm sorry.
of Greek, 3 people.
Woo!
There you go. Look at that.
Wow, I started.
I don't know. I think it was only a semester, 2 semesters for me. So we'll keep it. We can put it back down to that 4. But all that to say, for me, any which way you want to take it, whether it's assembly or whatever, for me, it always ends and begins with Jesus. And so whether it's talking about, and I definitely, firstly, I 100% don't think the church, it refers to a 401c3 nonprofit organization or worldwide. Surely the church, clearly that couldn't have been Christ's understanding in the time and place he was at. But when it comes to, even if it comes to I'm going to build my church off of you, we use a lot more of Paul's writings to base our Christian faith off of than we do Peter's teachings. We use, Peter's not even the lead disciple after Christ leaves. It's James is the leader of the disciples at the very beginning of the book of Acts. James is their leader. And so for me, I just really love that Jesus says, look at you. You didn't even figure out that I'm the Messiah. God, my Father, showed that to you. You're a little pebble. You're a little rock. And you know what? You're blessed by my presence. You're blessed with me, and you're enough as you are. There is a larger rock out there.
So would Peter be a chip off the old
block? Ooh,
okay.
Wow. Okay.
I'm here all week.
Don't attend the 9 o'clock show. It's exactly the same as the 7, but all week for sure. Oh man! No, I just thought it was interesting, and it makes sense from someone who hasn't done Greek or know more in depth, just that it would fall on Jesus, that this would be what we're building. I mean, the Father to send him to this world seems counterproductive to be like, yeah, I'm going to send you. Let's put Peter as the basis of everything. That doesn't seem to make sense.
Let's go back to Peter,
either.
what Peter's talking about in 1 Peter when he says that Jesus is the foundation and we're building a living temple. We are spiritual stones being built into a living temple. To me, that is a beautiful picture of the assembly, the church.
Yeah.
This living temple that God no longer builds with his residence is no longer wood or gold-covered wood or stone building.
Yeah.
But rather it's the people that he's chosen. His chosen people are his new living temple. And together, and it's the text that I believe Paul says, where he says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there with them. Why? Well, because back in 1 Corinthians, you are the body of Christ. And so when you have an assembly of Christians, you have Christ. You have Christ there. You are that living embodiment, and the foundation, the brain, whatever you want to say, the guiding force has to be Jesus, the Holy Spirit living in us.
Well, and I think just for sheer conjecture, even if Jesus was referring to Peter as the rock, he would be referring to the sheer impossibility that you would use a pebble as a cornerstone, right? So that would just be ridiculous and almost funny, to think that this little pebble would be the cornerstone.
Would be the thing,
Obviously, that alone by itself can't be the cornerstone. So I don't know, even if, however the wordplay went, I think ultimately it still comes down to Jesus is the big rock.
Well, as we start to wrap it up here, we answered, I think, every question, both services, except for, and I'm going to leave this one to last, because it's going to play into where we're headed next week, according to Ken's comment. So we'll save this because I just want to make sure that's the last thing we go over. Through the comments, though, there were not so many questions as just, I thought this message really brought some comfort to people who were feeling a lot like Peter. Lamb said, I needed to hear this today. And there were many of those comments. I somehow lost the ones from earlier, first service, but there were many of those that were the same. And Kathy said, it definitely gave things to think on. My initial thought was the faith of Peter, but his was as flawed as mine. As a Christian, I know that Christ is the rock and cornerstone. Just never thought of those verses as saying that. Definitely things to think on and to really look at each verse, which I heard that on Friday night as well. People saying that putting the chosen as put me back in my Bible, in the Gospels, looking at how things have happened and, where is that creativity license that's being taken, the holy imagination that they're using to tell these stories so well. And Jazzy said, in this week's episode, Jesus told Peter, I will make you fishers of men. You are to gather as many as possible, all kinds. I will sort them out later. Why do we act like the sorting of who is or isn't acceptable to God is our responsibility? Isn't that a pebble versus boulder issue? And I know that next week is the Chosen Season 1, Episode 7 Invitations, which that's your favorite episode, Ken? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, you'll find I have another favorite episode later on in the series, but this is.
What do we go for? I didn't look ahead. I mean, I know I've seen it, but what does this one cover?
This one is Nicodemus coming to Jesus at night, and then it's also the call of Matthew the disciple. And
how can that not be one of your favorites? I mean, how can you not fall in love with Nicodemus in this series?
I feel like if we leave out John 3:16 from this, we've missed something. So I think that is my theme verse for this upcoming sermon is John 3:16 and 17. And really, to Jazzy, what a great question from last week, and I'm glad that you kind of see where I'm rolling with this to a certain extent here, because who are we when we start deciding who we're going to sort? Jesus actually has a parable about that, and I at the risk of including something that may wind up in my sermon this next week, Jesus tells a parable about an enemy that goes through and sows weeds into a field of, I believe, wheat. And the servants of the farmer say, well, should we go and get the weeds out of this field of wheat? And the farmer said, no, you got to leave it alone, because if you start pulling out the weeds, you're going to pull out some of the wheat too. And for some reason, some of us are all too comfortable weeding where we haven't been asked to. One of the things that we're going to notice in this upcoming episode is that, with that, I'm not giving anything away, you have Jesus calling Nicodemus and you have him calling Matthew, which are two people on the polar opposite ends of the social strata in biblical times, in biblical Judea at that time. And so this episode really well captures that Jesus calls people from both ends of the strata. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to follow Jesus. And does that mean that you have to get rid of every sin in your life and that you have to get everything figured out before you follow Jesus? Or does it mean that the call to follow Jesus is not a call that where everything gets figured out in that moment, but the call is to allow Jesus to start sorting things out of your life as you follow him down the road? And so that's what we'll be talking about this next week.
Every week it's, somebody's favorite episode, and then you go, yeah, but that scene, ooh, that's a good one. Like every storyline might not be your favorite, every character might not be your favorite, but even the not so favorite characters can be in a storyline in the show that you're just like, I can't. This is too good, and this is one that I think early on that I think I've probably seen it 5, 6, 7, 8, who knows how many times. And every time though, if it just doesn't make the hair on your arms stand up and make you just, when him and Nicodemus, their interaction, that's just so good. So if you haven't seen it, please watch it beforehand. And if you're local, 2800 North Orange Avenue. If you put it in Google, I know you'll find it. We have a ton of people searching.
And if you're not local and you start right now, chances are, wherever you are in the United States, you should be able to get here given enough.
Let's see.
We'll see you on Saturday.
Yeah, Wednesday, you better get a move on if you're listening to this and you're like West Coast. 45 hours straight through.
But it can be done. It can be done.
That's as fast as I could do it.
45 hours? That's pretty quick.
San Francisco to Orlando, no sleep. Straight through 9.
Is that on the Harley or something?
Oh, well, no.
Well, this drops early Wednesday morning, so you have all of Wednesday, all of Thursday, all of Friday.
Yeah,
I just feel like you
golden.
Can do it.
And it can be done. Your ankles will be huge when you get here.
And I want you to know, should you do that, we will have a meal for you.
Yes.
We will. Yes.
We will feed you if you try.
We would like...
We're going to have to see the odometer. I was
just going to say, we need some confirmation. Keep your receipts, and a picture of the odometer before you leave and all that good stuff. GPS,
Does
sightings.
flying count, or do they have to drive?
If you fly, we'll still make you lunch.
Absolutely.
If you show up on Saturday, I will guarantee that I can...
We'll just need a copy of your airline miles.
That's right. We will find it. So, if, flying is cheating a little bit, but it can be done in a car. It absolutely can be.
There we go.
So, all right. Well, I am looking forward to each week. It's like a little bit something different, and it's been fun so far. And I seeing the episodes that we have upcoming, my favorite coming in a couple of weeks, I am super excited. So please do come Friday night, though. It was really nice to just hang out. And we had about 45, 50 people, something like that. And just to be able to hear everyone else's commentary. I mean, I've watched it with my family a ton of times, and we discuss it every time.
Mm-hmm.
And
they actually have extra butter that you can put on that popcorn.
Yeah. It's
and
delicious.
Extra seasoning.
More butter.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. And so it's a good viewing experience, and we can hang out.
And if you bring some cash with you, you can make a donation to the youth, and then you can take away some beverages as well.
That's right.
They might even
Maybe
chill
even
those.
some M&Ms.
Yeah. There were what? There were M&Ms?
There were M&Ms.
All right.
I guess you're going to have to come again on Friday.
I guess I'm going to have to come again this Friday.
See you there.
But hopefully we'll see you guys there as well. So I think that was it. I was something else I was going to say, and I don't remember what it was. So we'll wait for next week after we've done Season 1, Episode 7, Invitations. Have a great week, everyone.